What if the person you trusted most with your health was hiding a secret that could destroy your life? Dr. Michael West, a respected doctor with a seemingly perfect life, finds himself caught in a web of secrets, where the line between professional boundaries and personal temptation becomes dangerously blurred. When the truth begins to surface, everything he's worked for, his career, his marriage, and his very future, threatens to fall apart. How far will he go to keep his darkest secrets buried? Stay with us as we uncover this shocking story of betrayal, fear, and a deadly secret that no one saw coming. Dr. Michael West was a man who had earned everything he had. A respected urologist in his early 40s, he had built a reputation that few could match. His practice was thriving, and his family adored him. As a devoted husband and father, he had created a life that appeared perfect from the outside. To his patients, he was the trusted doctor, the one they turned to when they were at their most vulnerable. He was known for his calm demeanor, his expertise, and his dedication to his work. He didn't just treat his patients, he cared for them, often going above and beyond to ensure they felt heard and understood. His practice flourished, and at home, his wife Claire greeted him every evening with a smile, a warm meal, and a sense of comfort that only a loving partner could provide. Claire, a devoted mother to their 2 young children, had been the cornerstone of Michael's perfect world. Their marriage, on the surface, was solid. She supported him, trusted him, and loved him deeply. To her, Michael was the man she had always dreamed of, kind, dedicated, and reliable. He was the rock of their family, the one she could always count on. Yet, beneath the well-maintained facade, Dr. West carried a burden, a secret that threatened to unravel the perfect life he had worked so hard to create. But in the silence of his office, he wondered if he could keep up the illusion for much longer. Jason Turner, 28, didn't have the luxury of control, at least not anymore. Once a confident and fit young man, Jason now found himself consumed by fear and uncertainty. The shadow of prostate cancer loomed large, not just because of his father's early death, but because he had learned, in the most terrifying way, that he might carry the same genetic curse. But that wasn't the worst part. Jason had learned that he would never be able to father children. The infertility diagnosis had torn through his life like a wrecking ball. No matter how many doctors he saw, no matter how many tests he endured, the fear never went away. He couldn't escape the constant feeling that his body was betraying him, and it ate away at his confidence. Jason felt like an outsider in his own life, like a part of him was missing, something he could never replace. His relationships had crumbled under the weight of this secret, and his fear was only growing. His friends urged him to move on, to focus on what he could control, but Jason was paralyzed by what he couldn't. Then a friend mentioned Dr. Michael West. "He's helped men with your issues," his friend had said. "He's the best. He'll listen. He can help." Desperation made Jason pick up the phone. He had no choice. What did he have to lose? Dr. West's office was everything Jason wasn't expecting. Calm, professional, welcoming. And Dr. West? He was everything Jason wasn't sure he was ready for. The doctor's empathy, his patience, his ability to make Jason feel like someone who truly mattered. It was almost disarming. "You're not alone in this," Dr. West reassured him, his voice steady, almost comforting. "We'll find a way forward." But there was something more to the encounter, something Jason couldn't ignore. When Dr. West spoke, Jason felt a strange connection, one that made him feel both relieved and oddly unsettled. For the first time in months, Jason felt like he wasn't invisible, and yet as he left that office, something lingered in the air. A quiet unease, like a question that had no easy answer. Jason returned to Dr. West's office for follow-ups, but what began as a professional relationship was quickly becoming something else. He found himself thinking about the doctor more than he should, thinking about how easy it was to talk to him, how understanding Dr. West seemed. But the more Jason confided in him, the more he realized that he was craving something the doctor could never offer. It wasn't just the treatment he was after anymore. It was something deeper, something unspoken. As Dr. West navigated the waters of his professional ethics, he couldn't help but notice it too. The way Jason's eyes lingered a little longer. The way his smile seemed to say more than words could. The attraction was there, undeniable but forbidden. Neither man knew it yet, but the path they were about to walk would lead them both down a road where secrets would spill, lines would be crossed, and trust would be shattered. What began as a simple consultation would soon spiral into something far darker, and neither Dr. West nor Jason could turn back. If you've made it this far, you're clearly as deep into this story as we are. Let us know where you're watching from in the comments. We see you, and we appreciate you. In the weeks that followed, Jason returned to Dr. West's office for more appointments. Each visit peeled back layers of Jason's emotional struggles, revealing a man plagued by loneliness and unresolved trauma. He spoke of his failed relationships, his fear of intimacy, and the constant sense that he wasn't worthy of love. Each conversation felt heavier, more personal. But what started as a medical relationship gradually shifted into something more complex. Jason found himself drawn to Dr. West in ways he hadn't anticipated. His gentle demeanor, his steady confidence, qualities that made Jason feel cared for in a way he had never experienced. Dr. West, however, struggled to maintain the professional distance that was necessary. He had seen countless patients before, but something about Jason stirred a vulnerability in him that he hadn't expected. Jason's openness, the raw honesty he offered about his insecurities, broke down walls Dr. West had spent years constructing. He found himself looking forward to their sessions, wanting to know more about this young man who was searching for answers, just as he had once done. Over time, Jason's compliments began to feel more personal. He started noticing the way Dr. West dressed, the way he carried himself, the strength in his calm, steady voice. It was subtle at first, small gestures and words that seemed innocent enough, but they lingered. "You really know how to make someone feel comfortable," Jason remarked one day, his eyes holding Dr. West's a moment longer than usual. "I guess that's why people trust you so much." Dr. West, ever the professional, smiled politely, brushing it off. "It's part of the job, Jason," he said. But even as he spoke, a small part of him couldn't ignore the way Jason's words made him feel. There was an undeniable attraction, one that Dr. West knew was dangerous, inappropriate. He had spent years building his reputation as a man of discipline, but now he found himself caught off guard. Then one day, Jason made a confession that sent everything spiraling. During an appointment, he looked at Dr. West with an intensity that made the doctor's pulse quicken. "I've always been attracted to older men," Jason admitted, his voice low, almost vulnerable. "And there's something about you, something I can't explain. It feels like there's this connection between us, one that I can't shake." The words hung in the air, charged with unspoken tension. Dr. West felt his breath catch. This was a moment he had hoped wouldn't come, an invitation to cross a line he couldn't afford to cross. But in that moment, with Jason's vulnerable eyes locked on his, something inside him snapped. Without thinking, he leaned in and kissed Jason. It wasn't just a kiss. It was the breaking point, the moment when everything changed. Jason responded eagerly, the hunger in his kiss matching the intensity of the feelings he had been hiding for weeks. Dr. West's mind raced as he pulled away, realizing the gravity of what had just happened. But it was too late. The boundary had been crossed, and both of them were too deep to turn back now. Claire noticed the subtle shifts in Michael's behavior. The late nights at the office, the unexplained phone calls. But when she asked, he reassured her, always with that calm, reassuring tone that had worked so well in the past. What began as a stolen kiss quickly grew into something more. Dr. Michael West and Jason Turner met in secret, hidden moments of passion that left Dr. West torn. The magnetic pull of Jason's vulnerability, combined with the lingering attraction he couldn't resist, consumed him. Each encounter, each whisper shared behind closed doors, was both a breath of life and a dagger to his conscience. Dr. West, a man who had prided himself on discipline and responsibility, found himself unraveling in ways he hadn't anticipated. The lines between his professional integrity and his growing desire for Jason blurred until they no longer seemed to exist at all. Jason, on the other hand, believed in the truth of their connection. Each meeting deepened his emotional attachment to Dr. West. The doctor wasn't just his medical professional, he was his confidant, his refuge. Jason's past of loneliness and unspoken fears made him cling to this relationship, believing that this was the love he had been waiting for. What began as a desperate escape from his own insecurities slowly twisted into something dangerously consuming. The emotional weight of their secret relationship was beginning to suffocate Dr. West. Jason's need for validation, for constant reassurance, became overwhelming. Every conversation, every moment of shared intimacy felt like a chain tightening around Dr. West's chest. The guilt, the shame of betraying his family, mounted with each passing day. Yet, in Jason's presence, Dr. West also felt something he hadn't felt in years: alive. Claire had started to notice the late nights at the office, the distant look in Michael's eyes during their dinner conversations. She never said anything, hoping it was just stress, but a feeling of unease settled in her gut. One night, Claire confronted him. "Michael, what's going on? You're different, distant. Is there something I should know?" The question lingered in the air, heavy with suspicion, but Dr. West quickly deflected with a weak smile, hiding the truth beneath layers of practiced calm. As the affair deepened, Dr. West's internal struggles intensified. He was losing himself in Jason's world, conflicted between the man he had been and the man he was becoming. The consequences of his actions loomed over him, but each kiss, each touch, left him paralyzed, unable to escape the toxic cycle he had helped create. While Michael worked tirelessly, Claire was managing their home and children, often putting her own needs last. The once thriving career she had before motherhood had been put on hold, leaving her feeling unfulfilled at times, though she never voiced it. But lately, the emptiness in her heart had grown more pronounced, especially as Michael became more distant. Claire's heart sank when Michael failed to return her calls. She had heard him on the phone the night before, but he hadn't said much. When he arrived home, his eyes avoided hers, and he barely kissed her, his mind elsewhere. Something wasn't right. Claire wanted to trust him. She had always trusted Michael, but there was a nagging feeling in her chest, a feeling she couldn't shake. Was he hiding something? And if he was, would it destroy everything they had built together? On 5th of September 2023. The room was tense, the air thick with unsaid words, when Jason finally revealed what had been haunting him. Dr. West had always been the one to listen, the one to comfort. But that day, Jason's confession shattered everything. It was supposed to be another quiet conversation, another attempt to salvage what was left of their secret relationship. Instead, Jason's eyes locked on Dr. West's, the weight of his words pressing down on them both. I have HIV, Jason said, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know until recently, but I've had risky behavior, things I didn't tell you. The words fell from his lips like lead, heavy and impossible to ignore. Dr. West froze, the blood draining from his face as the revelation hit him. For a moment, time stood still. Jason's words echoed in his ears, but they felt like a distant murmur as his mind raced to process the gravity of the situation. How could this have happened? How could he have missed something so critical, something that could destroy everything he had worked for? Jason's face was a mask of devastation, and for the first time, Dr. West saw the full depth of the emotional turmoil that had been driving him. But the shock was rapidly replaced by fear. His mind raced with a terrifying thought. Could he have contracted HIV? He had been intimate with Jason without protection. The weight of this realization suffocated him, as the consequences were not just personal, but professional. His marriage, his career, his reputation, all of it was hanging by a thread. The affair, which had been a dangerous but passionate escape, now felt like a trap. The allure of their secret meetings had turned into a nightmare, and as the weight of the potential exposure pressed on Dr. West, his next move became even less certain. In the days that followed, Dr. West did what he had hoped to avoid. He underwent testing. The results came back, confirming his worst fears. He had contracted HIV, and the fear that had been building inside him over the past few weeks now exploded into full-blown panic. His mind whirled with thoughts of the implications: his marriage to his wife, his standing in the medical community, and his patients. Could he still practice medicine? Could his life go back to normal? Dr. West felt the walls closing in, the pressure mounting with each passing moment. This was no longer just a forbidden affair. It was a ticking time bomb that could destroy everything. He had once been in control, but now he was lost, drowning in a sea of guilt and fear that threatened to consume him. As the days passed, the situation grew more dire. Jason's emotional state had taken a sharp turn, becoming more erratic and unstable. The deep fear of his own diagnosis was consuming him, and the guilt he carried for infecting Dr. West was now matched by a growing sense of entitlement. Jason was no longer the vulnerable man seeking solace. He was a man with power, one who realized he could wield his knowledge of the affair and the HIV diagnosis against the very man who had once seemed untouchable. "You owe me," Jason demanded, his voice tinged with desperation and anger. "You knew what you were getting into, but you didn't protect me. I'm not the only one at risk here. You've ruined my life. I deserve something for what you've done to me." Dr. West's stomach churned at the sight of Jason, the man he had once felt so deeply connected to, now turning on him with a vehemence he hadn't anticipated. Jason's threats came in waves, each one more direct and aggressive than the last. "I'll tell everyone," he said, his words sharp. "I'll expose the affair, expose the truth about us and your diagnosis. You'll lose everything. Your family, your career, gone." The fear coursing through Dr. West was palpable, but it was more than just the thought of his reputation unraveling. It was the weight of his family's future, his children, his wife, who had no idea of the darkness creeping into their lives. Jason had become an uncontrollable force, holding the key to his destruction, and the pressure was eating away at him. Dr. West's mind raced, conflicted between the guilt of his actions and the desperation to protect his life from crumbling. His career, his whole identity, was at stake. And the harder Jason pushed, the more trapped Dr. West felt. Jason had shifted from a source of emotional relief to a constant threat, one that Dr. West could no longer avoid. With each new demand, the guilt gnawed at him. But the fear of losing everything, his family, his career, his identity, overpowered that guilt. Jason's threats were more than just words. They were his lifeline to power, and Dr. West realized too late that he might have pushed too far. The tangled web of deception was growing tighter, and Dr. West could see only one way out, one way to silence the threat once and for all. The meeting was inevitable. Jason had been drinking, his anger sharp and uncontrollable as he entered Dr. West's office. His words were laced with resentment. "You think you can just walk away? You'll pay for what you did to me," Jason slurred, his eyes wild with fury. The affair, the lies, the HIV diagnosis, it was all coming to a head. Dr. West tried to keep his composure, but the tension in the room was suffocating. Jason's threats felt more real than ever. "I'll expose everything. The affair, your HIV status, your whole life will fall apart," Jason hissed. Fear gripped Dr. West. His marriage, career, and reputation were at risk. Jason's emotional manipulation was escalating, and the pressure was unbearable. He had promised himself he wouldn't let it get this far, but now, in this heated moment, his instincts took over. Jason's anger surged as he took a step forward. "You can't stop me," he yelled, pushing Dr. West to the edge. In a flash of panic, Dr. West grabbed a nearby lamp and struck Jason. The blow was hard and unforgiving. Jason fell to the floor, motionless. Dr. West stood over him, breathless, his heart racing. The reality of what he had just done began to sink in. Jason was dead, and with him, any chance of redemption. Frantic, Dr. West quickly staged the scene. He scattered pills around Jason's body, making it look like an overdose. The immediate relief from the threat of exposure washed over him, but guilt began to crawl into his chest. He had killed to protect his life, but he knew the consequences would follow him forever. In the days following Jason's death, Dr. West tried to maintain the appearance of normalcy. He returned to his practice, attended to patients, and pretended that nothing had changed. But in the silence of his own mind, the guilt began to eat away at him. He couldn't escape the image of Jason's lifeless body, the sound of the impact, the weight of his actions. It was always there, lurking in the back of his mind, slowly driving him to the edge. The police began their investigation into Jason's death, but for a while, nothing pointed directly to Dr. West. He had staged the scene so carefully, and it seemed like the case might remain a tragic accident. However, as the days wore on, the pressure of living a lie grew heavier. Dr. West found himself constantly looking over his shoulder, certain that someone, anyone, would uncover the truth. Every knock at the door, every phone call, made his heart race with panic. The weight of his secret was unbearable, and no matter how much he tried to move forward, it was always there, threatening to unravel his life. As the investigation continued, the walls slowly began to close in on Dr. West. His colleagues noticed his erratic behavior, the paranoia, and the strange tension in his posture. His marriage, already strained, began to crumble under the weight of his internal guilt. His wife, once supportive and trusting, grew suspicious of his increasingly distant demeanor. The cracks in their relationship deepened as Dr. West pushed his family away, consumed by his own fear. Eventually, the investigation uncovered critical evidence pointing directly to Dr. West. Forensic findings and witness testimonies revealed inconsistencies in his story. His alibi unraveled as the police pieced together the truth. In a dramatic turn, Dr. West was arrested, and the truth was exposed in a very public way. His career, once built on years of trust and hard work, was destroyed. His marriage ended in a bitter divorce, with his wife unable to forgive the man who had betrayed their life together. Dr. West was charged with second-degree murder and sentenced to 25 years in prison. The life he had once known, his career, his family, his reputation, was gone in an instant. When the truth came out, it was like a bomb had exploded. The man Claire had built her life with, the man she had given everything to, was a stranger. She stood in the courtroom, tears brimming in her eyes, as the weight of his betrayal crushed her. All their years together, all their promises, shattered in an instant. With a final, broken heart, Claire made her decision. The love they once had, so full of promise, so full of trust, was gone. She couldn't stay with a man who had betrayed everything they had built. Walking away was the hardest thing she had ever done. But it was the only way she could reclaim herself. As Dr. West sat in prison, reflecting on the life he had lost, he realized the cost of his actions. His guilt, the affair, the lies, everything had led to this moment, and there was no turning back. What do you think? Was Dr. West's guilt justified, or did he make the right choice to protect himself? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more gripping true crime stories that reveal the dark secrets behind the headlines.